Hello and welcome to the garden. Well, this is part 2 of my tour of the undercover growing spaces. So in the first video I went round the small greenhouse behind me where we've got our chilies and the smaller fruited peppers. In this video I'm going to go to the polytunnel and the larger greenhouses and we'll see what's going on in there. So I'm in the polytunnel now, and here we've got tomatoes all around the outside, and down the center I've got half a dozen sweet banana peppers and half a dozen aubergines. Now I do tend to get reasonable results from my peppers and chilies, less so from aubergines. I don't know why. I don't tend to get quite so good results with those, and something I'm working on. So I grow them in exactly the same way, but maybe they don't quite like the conditions. I'm not sure what's happening with those. The tomatoes, most of these are apalca. At the ends I've got some different varieties, but both sides they're supposed to be apalca. One of them definitely isn't, because its foliage is completely different, and it's some tiny runty thing. I have no idea what variety that is, but there's obviously some rogue seed there. Now all the others have exactly the same sort of growth habit and foliage, and it's a little bit thin and weak and wispy, and actually these were very skinny, weedy plants when they went in. Quite different from most of the other varieties. They're a lot stockier, and it must just be part of the nature of this variety, but also the fruit are wildly different. This is supposed to be a Polish heirloom plum tomato. Well, I don't know if even half of them have plum tomato shaped fruit. Maybe some of them look like plum tomatoes, and others, well, I've got just about every tomato shape you could imagine. I've got some big fat round ribbed ones. They look like they're fruit from completely different plants, but the foliage is quite distinctive and it's the same on all of them except that one rogue. So I'm pretty sure it's the right variety. It's just that they're hugely variable. I've got some weird issues with some of the tomatoes this year, so I'm not entirely happy yet, and well, I don't know. Maybe we'll get good fruit at the end of the day, but I've got some issues. And some of these plants, those in the greenhouses, they're immensely vigorous, great big fat stems and great growth from them, but I'm not seeing yet the large trusses and particularly large fruits that we got last season, and I'm not sure why that is. I did note that the rootstocks that I grafted them onto behaved very different this year from last. I don't have a huge experience with it. Of course, this is only my second year grafting, but last year those rootstocks, well, they germinated very quickly. They were vigorous and they grew away fantastically well. This year germination was a bit slower and it was a bit patchy, and they were reluctant to get going, and that's not what I expected from either that rootstock based on its description or indeed from my experience the previous year. So I don't know whether there might have been an issue with that rootstock, came from a different supplier, so perhaps. I seem to be getting a lot of vegetative growth and not as much of the energy going into the fruit, and that's not what I want. I want most of the energy going into the fruit. So I don't know. I don't think I'll ever be able to answer that question, why that's happening this season, but so far results are a little bit mixed. I've also got some rogue varieties. I'm supposed to have a cordon, a smaller fruited cordon tomato in one of the greenhouses, and I've got 6 of the plants in there. One of them's a cordon tomato. It's a great big vigorous tall thing. All the others are squat runty looking plants, and after a while I realized that they have to be bush types, and of course I've been pruning them like a cordon, so taking all the side shoots off. Last thing you want to do with a bush type, I'm not going to get any fruit on it. So I've got these really squat plants there. I don't know what they are, but they're definitely not what I ordered. So I've got some rogue seed in here, so things aren't quite going so well in Tomato Town. But let's take a look at the plants. So down the center I've got a random assortment of spare onions. I just slipped those in. Actually, they're doing very well here in the tunnel. I might do that again next year. But there's a nice little crop of sweet banana. I think that's probably a typical sized fruit for these. And yeah, most of these are, I mean, this one's not quite ready yet. This is still proper green. When they're ready, they start to turn a more yellow color. I can show you that on one of the other plants. And at that point, they're ready, and they're most commonly used, I think, when they're at that just sort of greeny yellow stage, and they're very nice when they're fried or grilled. They're excellent on the barbecue, and that's where some of these are going later today. Got a little bit of aphid in here, I think. Just a touch on here. I come through from time to time and give them just a little bit of a mild soap solution, and that does tend to keep it under control. I'm very cautious doing that when the ladybirds are about. Of course, if I see any ladybirds or larvae, then I won't be spraying anything. So these are a nice productive variety, and they're not doing a huge amount now, and that's because they're carrying so much fruit already. I mean, what have I got on here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, I've got 9 on here already, and some smaller ones have set. But when I start harvesting these, then there'll be more energy available to put into further growth and then more fruit. So I've got some strings on these to give them a little bit of support, and you can see that, like all of the peppers now in the polytunnel and the greenhouses, they've all been pruned to just 2 stems. So at every point where the stem divides, I've just kept 1 branch on each side. So that's how I prune the, let's say, the main crop peppers. Completely different from the small greenhouse. There I let them go pretty natural. I hardly touch them, but here I just keep the 2 stems. When you start to get sort of regrowth, new shoots come up, I pinch all of those out, and that keeps them nice and tidy. Lots of airflow through here, and doesn't reduce the harvest at all, because these will set just as much fruit as they can possibly carry. And this is a fairly productive variety. I'm doing something similar with the aubergines here. I've got 2 main stems, again supported with some strings. This one is Violetta differenza. I've got 1 big fat fruit down the bottom. That's looking very nice. Won't be too long before I get to try that one, and it looks like I've got plenty of other fruit have set. So again, I don't think limiting this to 2 main stems in any way reduces the harvest, because it's just not going to produce more fruit on a larger, bushier plant than these will over the course of the season. This one is Rosa sfumata. You can just see a little bit of it. Basically, it's a white fruit with this pinky violet blush. You can just see a touch of it there. Yeah, that one's doing all right. And then I've got long purple. Well, that's a young fruit on its way, and the one behind, well, it won't be long before that one is ready to go. So here are the apalca plants. I mean, I have no experience with this variety, so I don't really know what to expect, but they all have this very distinctive foliage about them, so I'm pretty confident that they are all the same variety, except that one rogue that's completely unrelated. But I'm sure these are all the same plant, but the fruit are widely varying on these. So here's one, for example, that has a fairly typical plum shape. This is what I'd expect to find. I expect this to be bigger, of course, as it matures. You can see a couple more there. It's quite a nice looking fruit. And look what we've got on the neighbouring plant. Well, this was probably a mega bloom. That doesn't count, but just look at that. I mean, that's more like an ox heart. It's completely the wrong shape, yet the foliage is quite distinctive and it's exactly the same. So I don't know. We've got some more sensible fruit there, but again, it's not quite the same as that first one. It's lacking a distinctive point on the bottom. The shape of the fruit is a little bit different. Next door, we've got more of the heart-shaped fruit. I mean, that's just not a plum tomato, is it? I don't know what I've got here, actually. That's a really good sized fruit there. It's just nothing like I expected. So this one is a complete rogue. This is the one that has completely different foliage. I don't know what this is. It's very squat. I think this must be a bush type again, and that's why I'm not getting the height out of it. I've been pinching it out as though it were a cordon. I've kind of stopped doing that now, so you can see I've got several stems coming up. None of these are racing away, so it really is indicative, I think, of a bush type. I have no idea what this might be. The fruit, though, they look quite nice. Actually, they look a bit plum-like, so I don't know. What have I got here? Have I got a variety that is just so highly variable, or have I got some seed that's, I don't know, with some cross-pollination? I'm not sure. Probably some cross-pollination, I would think. I mean, that's a weird shaped fruit. I suspect there has been some cross-pollination here, and although the foliage has a pretty consistent character, the fruit, they're just weird. I mean, it doesn't mean they'd be bad. They could be perfectly delicious fruit, but I don't think I've got quite what I should have. I've got rows of wonderful basil here in front of the tomatoes. These were from supermarket pots, so yeah, I cheated there, but they are fantastic and they're immensely productive. And you know, this is just 2 or 3 stems from one of those pots. I broke up the pots there and divided them, and all you have to do is look at it every time you pinch out. Don't take whole stuff from the bottom, but pinch out just above where you get these new shoots, and every time you take, you get more and more and more. So it's just immensely productive. This was maybe, I don't know, 1/6 of a pot of basil, and it's now got more growth on it than the full pot would have had. So yeah, it will produce and produce all summer. All I have to do is come along and pinch it out often enough, because if you don't pinch it out, it will run to seed, and that will be that. And even if I don't want to use it fresh, I need to do something with it, turn it into pesto perhaps, because it's better to pinch the plants out than to let them go. My garlic back here, I was hoping to leave that for another week or 2, but you can see it is pretty rusty in here now, so I think I need to lift that very soon. There's one variety in here that deserves a special mention because it is ridiculously productive. Just look at the truss on this. This is one truss. it's absolutely huge. It's a fairly short growing plant. I mean, in a good season it might get to sort of average height, but there are just so many fruits going to appear on here, and it's a really nice fruit. This is Riesentraub, so it produces cherry tomatoes, but actually they're a really good size for a cherry tomato, and a bit bigger than usual, a bit bigger than sort of supermarket cherry tomatoes, I think, and the flavour is pretty good for a small tomato. We grew this for the first time last year. We really liked it, and we've got it again this year. This year they're grafted plants, but even last year the trusses were enormous. I think perhaps they might be rather bigger this year, but I mean, they were huge trusses last year. You just get so much fruit from them. You don't need too many of these. These are going to provide an enormous quantity of cherry tomatoes later in the year. So that's it for the polytunnel, and I think I'll return with a final part when we can take a look around the main greenhouses. I've got some immensely vigorous tomato plants in there. They're grafted onto the same rootstock, but the nature of the scion does make a difference. So these are palka plants. When I grafted them, they were ever so weedy, and I mean they're okay, there's nothing wrong with them, but they're not the most vigorous of plants now, even after they've been grafted. The other varieties though, they were much stronger before grafting, and on that rootstock they are incredibly vigorous, at least vegetatively. I'm not sure yet how they're going to do on yield, but I mean the plants are huge, probably 7 feet tall already, many of them, and yeah, they're really growing very well, but time will tell. As to fruit, now of course a lot of these are large fruited sorts, so you have to wait quite a while before you get anything, and I might adjust the balance of large and small fruited sorts for next season so that I do get some tomatoes a little bit sooner. If I've just got mostly large fruited tomatoes, then I'm not getting anything until quite late in the year. Anyway, that is all for this video. Thanks ever so much for watching, and bye for now.